Adamu and Musa were no ordinary thieves. Their targets lay beneath the ground. Night after night, under the cover of darkness, they raided graves, prying open coffins to steal jewels, clothes, and belongings buried with the dead. They did not fear the dead, they exploited them, day in, day out, and whatever they get from this corpse they sell without keeping anything to themselves. Through this, Adamu and Musa have been able to live a comfortable life. But one fateful night, their greed led them to a grave that should have been left untouched. This is their story. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We really need your support so we can hit 5,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. The wind howled through the barren trees, carrying with it a biting chill that seemed to whisper warnings to anyone bold enough to be out this late. But for Adamu and Musa, two seasoned grave robbers, this was just another night of work. With shovels in hand and greed in their hearts, they crept into the old cemetery, eyes gleaming as they searched for fresh graves. As they wandered among the headstones that night, Adamu stopped abruptly. He pointed his lantern toward a freshly dug grave. "Look at this, Musa," he said, his voice low and eager. "A new one. This will be worth our trouble." Without hesitation, they plunged their shovels into the loose soil, working quickly to unearth the coffin below. The headstone bore a name, Oladimeji Johnson. When they pried the coffin open, the flickering lantern light revealed a man dressed in fine clothing, his face serene even in death. Around his neck hung a gold chain, and his fingers were adorned with glittering rings. Musa let out a low whistle. This one was wealthy, he said, reaching into the coffin to snatch the chain. "Look at all this gold. What a fool to bury it with him." Adamu chuckled as he pulled the rings from Oladimeji's cold fingers. "A fool indeed, but lucky for us, his loss is our gain. What will he even do with all this gold in the afterlife?" As they both laughed. They worked quickly, stripping the body of its valuables and stuffing them into their satchels. Once their haul was secure, they covered the grave and slipped away into the night, laughing at their good fortune. The journey back to their apartment should have been uneventful, but as they walked along the forest path, a strange unease began to settle over them. The air, once cool and crisp, grew heavy and stifling. The wind, which had whispered through the trees, now carried a faint, mournful wail. Adamu stopped abruptly. "Do you hear that?" he asked, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Musa frowned. "Hear what? It's just the wind." But the sound grew louder, more distinct. It was not the wind. It was a voice, low and whispery, calling out their names. Adamu, Musa. Both men froze, their laughter silenced. Adamu clutched his satchel tightly, his pulse quickening. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling. "Show yourself and let fight man to man. Don't beat around the bush, if he's sure for you." The forest offered no reply. The voice faded, leaving only the rustling of leaves in its wake. Musa shook his head, forcing a laugh. "You are imagining things," he said, though his voice betrayed his own unease. "Come on, let's get back." By the time they reached their apartment, the men were on edge. The night seemed darker than it should have been, the shadows deeper and more menacing, but greed outweighed their fear. They retreated to Adamu's place to inspect their spoils. Under the dim glow of a lantern, they emptied their satchels onto the table. The gold chain, the rings, and the other trinkets gleamed in the light. Musa grinned as he picked up the chain. "This will fetch us a fortune at the market," he said. But as he held the chain, it began to grow warm than hot. Musa yelped, dropping it to the table. The chain clattered loudly, the sound echoing unnaturally. Adamu stared at the chain, his heart pounding. "What's happening?" he whispered. Before Musa could answer, the bulb flickered, casting the room in eerie shadows. The temperature dropped, their breath visible in the sudden chill. And then they heard it again, the voice, low and menacing. "You disturbed my rest." The men leapt to their feet, their eyes darting around the room. The voice grew louder, more insistent. "You stole what was mine. Now you will pay." The shadows on the walls twisted and shifted, taking on the form of a man. Oladimeji's ghostly figure emerged from the darkness, his eyes burning with rage.
"Return it," he bellowed, his voice shaking the very walls of the house, "or your souls will never know peace."
Adamu and Musa backed into the farthest corner of the room, their faces pale, their hearts pounding like a drum. The ghostly figure of Oladimeji loomed before them, his translucent form flickering in the dim lantern light. His voice was like the rumble of distant thunder, his eyes glowing with an unearthly fire.
"You have desecrated my grave," Oladimeji intoned, his voice dripping with wrath. "You have taken what was mine. For this you will suffer."
Musa, trembling, fell to his knees. We didn't know," he stammered. "Please, forgive us." Adamu clutched his satchel, his voice shaking as he tried to reason with the ghost. "We'll return everything. The gold, the ring sits yours. Just leave us in peace." But Oladimeji did not move. His form grew darker, more menacing. The air in the room turned icy, and the light from the lantern was snuffed out entirely, plunging the room into complete darkness. Then came the whispers, low, guttural murmurs that seemed to come from every corner. "You cannot escape. You will pay. Justice will be served." The sound of the whispers grew louder, almost deafening, until suddenly everything went silent. When the lantern flickered back to life, the ghost was gone, and the room was eerily still. But the gold chain and rings remained on the table, glinting in the faint light. The following day, Adamu and Musa tried to convince themselves it was just their imaginations. They avoided mentioning the ghost, focusing instead on how much their haul would fetch at the market. "Let's sell it and be done with it," Adamu said, his tone more curt than usual. "We'll split the money and forget this ever happened." But forgetting was not an option. Strange things began to happen. Wherever they went, they felt as though they were being watched. None of their vendors wanted to buy the chains. It felt like something was hunting them. At night, their dreams were filled with the same terrifying image. Oladimeji standing at the foot of their beds, pointing an accusatory finger. His voice rang in their ears, even as they awoke, drenched in sweat. "You disturbed my rest. You will pay." Adamu and Musa were at their wits' end. Ever since they had stolen the gold and jewelry from Oladimeji's grave, his ghost had been tormenting them relentlessly. Their once bold demeanor was now replaced by fear and desperation. Every night, Oladimeji's voice echoed in their ears, and every shadow seemed to hold his fiery gaze. They needed a solution, and fast. Musa, pacing their dimly lit room, finally spoke up. "T here is a man in the neighboring town. They say he knows how to deal with spirits. Let's go to him." Adamu hesitated, but eventually nodded. Anything is better than this madness. The next morning, they traveled to see Baba Shango, a well-known herbalist rumored to have dealt with restless spirits before. His hut was filled with an assortment of jars, herbs, and animal skulls, the air thick with the scent of incense. After listening to their story, Baba Shango rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You have angered a powerful spirit," he said, "but I have something that may help." He handed them a small clay pot filled with a pungent-smelling ointment. "Rub this on your bodies," he instructed, "especially before going to bed. The scent will repel spirits and protect you." Musa eyed the pot suspiciously. "How much?" Baba Shango named a hefty price. The men reluctantly paid, knowing they had little choice. That night, they applied the ointment, its stench so overwhelming that they gagged. "If this works," Adamu muttered, It's worth every coin and odor. But as soon as they settled into bed, the torment resumed. His ghostly form materialized, more terrifying than ever, his fiery eyes fixed on them. Musa screamed as Oladimeji lunged at them, his form passing through their bodies like icy death. When morning came, the men were battered, bruised, and furious. They stormed into Baba Shango's hut, their anger barely contained. "Your ointment didn't work," Adamu shouted. "We spent all that money for nothing." The herbalist frowned. "That is unusual. Perhaps Oladimeji is stronger than I anticipated." Musa's face flared in rage, his. "We want a refund." Baba Shango smiled. "The Oracle does not do refunds only if you want it in the afterlife." Adamu told Musa to stay calm as he was better equipped to have a conversation with the Oracle priest. Baba Shango held up his hands to calm them. "Fine, fine. If the ointment didn't work, I'll give you something else." He handed them a jar filled with water. "Sprinkle this around your home 3 times. In the morning, afternoon, and before you go to sleep at night. It will calm the spirit and keep him away from your dreams." Adamu and Musa reluctantly took the jar, muttering under their breath as they left. That day, the men sprinkled the water as instructed, hoping for relief. At first, it seemed to work. They slept soundly for the first 2 days, but on the 3rd day, the torment resumed. In their dreams, Oladimeji appeared, his face twisted with anger. This time, he held a long whip in his hand.
"You dare try to silence me with tricks," he roared. "You will feel the pain you have caused."
Before they could react, Oladimeji began to whip them mercilessly. The lashes burned like fire, each one cutting deeper than the last. Their screams echoed through the dream and into the waking world. When they awoke, the pain was still there. Their bodies were covered in red welts, as if the whipping had been real. Determined to end their suffering, Adamu and Musa returned to Baba Shango's hut, their anger now replaced with desperation and fear. This time, they needed a permanent solution. Adamu and Musa arrived at the oracle shrine just before dusk. The chief priest sat cross-legged on a mat, his staff resting against his shoulder. Adamu and Musa knelt before him, their fear palpable. The priest regarded them with piercing eyes, then spoke in a low, measured tone. "You come seeking mercy for the wrongs you have committed, but the spirit of the one you desecrated will not rest until his demands are met." As if summoned by the priest's words, the room grew cold. The flickering flames of the oil lamps dimmed, and a ghostly figure emerged from the shadows. It was Oladimeji, his translucent form glowing faintly, his eyes filled with sorrow and anger. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in the fine attire he had been buried in. His eyes burned with an otherworldly fire, and his voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of the grave. "You dare seek mercy," he said, his voice cold and unforgiving.
"When you have desecrated my rest and stolen what was mine."
Adamu and Musa threw themselves flat on the ground, trembling. "We are sorry, but I am not here for vengeance." Adamu trembled, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from us?" Oladimeji's ghost gestured, and the room seemed to transform. Shadows on the walls shifted, forming scenes from his life. The thieves watched as his story unfolded. Oladimeji's father, a proud man with 7 children, had always favored fairness among his family, but the seeds of envy grew nonetheless. As the 5th born, Oladimeji had risen above his humble beginnings, building a thriving car business and a successful loan company with his wife Diana. Diana had been his partner in all things, her sharp mind and determination helping them scale every challenge. "She was my world," Oladimeji said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Together, we built a life of love and prosperity, but my siblings saw only what they could take." The scene shifted to show Like and Myde, Oladimeji's brothers, standing before him with outstretched hands. Their requests were endless: money for school fees, funds for failed businesses, help with personal debt, even monthly allowance. despite giving them opportunity starting car wash and cold room businesses for both of them with over $7,000, his brothers squandered the chances. The scene showed Oladimeji arguing with Diana, her face lined with frustration. Diana was unhappy but was scared. They might blame her if I stopped helping, but I was done. I was tired, he admitted. Tired of pouring water into broken pots. When I finally refused, my brothers turned on me. They called me greedy, selfish, unwilling to help my blood. They called me a traitor. Humans are so quick to forget. The shadows darkened, and the scene showed a banquet. Leek and Jide were there, smiling and pouring drinks. Oladimeji was seated, unaware of the poison that would soon claim his life. They lured me with false promises of reconciliation, Oladimeji said. But that night, they took everything from me. They poisoned me, knowing my heart was weak. And when I died, they told the world I had a heart attack. No one questioned it. No one suspected a thing. I died of cardiac arrest, or so they said. My chest tightened, my heart stopped, and I collapsed right in my own home. But I know the truth. It wasn't fate or the gods. It was murder. Adamu and Musa exchanged terrified glances. Musa whispered, "Why are you telling us this?" The ghost leaned closer, his fiery gaze piercing through them.
Because you have taken what was mine, and now you will make it right.
Voice trembling with pain. The room filled with whispers of sorrow as the scene shifted again. Diana, grieving and vulnerable, was accused by Oladimeji's family of being a witch who had brought about his death. They shaved her head, cast her and her 2 children out of the house, and took control of all his wealth. They humiliated my wife and children, Oladimeji said, his voice trembling with rage. They tarnished my name, calling her a murderer and me a fool. But the truth is buried, just as I was. The ghost turned to Adamu and Musa, his eyes burning with intensity. The only way I will release you is if you restore what my family has stolen. Help Diana and my children regain their home. Restore honor to my name and expose those who killed me. Desperate to escape their torment, the robbers agreed to help. Oladimeji gave them a cryptic clue by directing the thieves to his wife's location, as it was important she helps them uncover the secret. The wind howled as Adamu and Musa approached the house Oladimeji described to them on the outskirts of town. "This is it," Adamu whispered, his voice barely audible. He glanced at Diana's house. "Do you think she'll even listen to us? We're the last people she'd trust." "We have no choice," Adamu replied. "Her husband's spirit won't leave us alone. If we don't fix this, we're as good as dead." After a long pause, the door creaked open just enough to reveal a woman's face, lined with exhaustion and distrust. Diana stood in the doorway, a scarf loosely covering her head. Her eyes, sharp but weary, scanned the strangers before her. "Who are you? What do you want?" Adamu cleared his throat. We have a message for you," he said cautiously. Diana's eyes narrowed. "From who?" Adamu hesitated. "From your husband, Oladimeji." Diana's breath hitched, and for a moment she stood frozen. Then suspicion flashed in her eyes. "What kind of nonsense is this? Do you think I am a fool?" "No, madam," Musa interjected quickly. "We swear it's the truth. Your husband's spirit sent us. Please, just hear us out." Diana tightened her grip on the door, her gaze flickering between the 2 men. "How dare you come here, bringing up his name? Leave before I call the police." "Wait," Adamu said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "We know you don't trust us, but he gave us a message, something only he could have known. Please let us explain." Diana hesitated, her fingers hovering over the door. The raw pain in her eyes betrayed her reluctance. After a long pause, she opened the door wider and stepped back. "5 minutes," she said coldly. "You have 5 minutes, and don't try anything foolish." The two men stepped inside, their movements slow and deliberate. The interior of the house was bare and modest, with only a few pieces of furniture. Diana stood with her arms crossed, her expression guarded. "Well?" she demanded. "What's this message?" Adamu swallowed hard. "Before we say anything, to hear is something you need to know, something we have to confess." Adamu hesitated, the words catching in his throat. Musa stepped forward, his voice trembling. We stole from your husband's grave. We didn't know who he was at the time, but we desecrated his resting place. We're sorry, truly." Diana's eyes widened, and a gasp escaped her lips. Her shock quickly turned to fury as she pointed a trembling finger at them. "You what? You grave-robbing scum! How dare you come here and—" "Please, madam," Adamu interrupted, dropping to his knees. "We're sorry. We know what we did was wrong, but his spirit came to us. He's been haunting us ever since. He told us to come to you and make things right." Diana stepped back, her chest rising and falling as her rage threatened to boil over. "You think you can just apologize and make this go away? Oh, so this is how you go around pretending to see the dead and push on your criminal schemes. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "We do," Musa cried, "and we're ready to do whatever it takes to make amends. He's here with us now, in this room." "He told us you can ask us anything, anything at all to prove we're telling the truth." Diana froze, her eyes darting around the room. "He's here." Adamu nodded. "Yes, you can ask us 3 questions only he could answer. He said we'd know the answers." Diana's hands shook as she sank into the lone chair. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the strangers. "If you are lying to me—" "We're not," Musa said earnestly. "Please, ask." Diana wiped her face with trembling fingers and steadied her voice. "Fine. If my husband is truly here, he will know this. What did he call me when he wanted to tease me?" Adamu and Musa exchanged a glance before Adamu spoke. "He called you professor because of your master's degree. He said it always made you blush." Diana's hand flew to her mouth, a sob escaping. She composed herself quickly. "What was his favorite thing to eat? Something he always asked me to make." Musa grinned faintly. "Fried plantains with pepper sauce. He said no one else could make it like you." Diana's tears began to fall freely now, but she pressed on. "The night he died," she whispered, "what did I tell him before he left the house?" Adamu hesitated, then spoke softly. "You told him not to go, that you had a bad feeling. You begged him to stay." At this, Diana broke down, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook as she sobbed, the reality of her husband's presence hitting her with full force. "He's here," she whispered through her tears. "He's really here." "Oladimeji, you should have listened to me," as she sobs uncontrollably. "If you have listened, you will still be here with me, by my side. See what they did to us, the people you called family." The air inside the room grew colder, indicating his presence. Adamu then replied. He said he was sorry, that he wished he truly listened. After several moments, Diana looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Why has he sent you? What does he want me to do?" Adamu and Musa exchanged a glance. Then Adamu spoke. "He wants justice. He wants you and your children to reclaim what was taken from you. He wants the truth about his death to come out." Diana's expression hardened as she wiped her tears away. "And you think you can help me do that?" "We don't have a choice," Musa said earnestly. "If we don't, his spirit won't let us go. And if you let us, we'll do whatever it takes to make things right for you, for him, and for your family." Diana studied them, her gaze searching for any hint of deceit. Finally, she nodded. "All right, I'll help you, but you'd better not make me regret this."
Episode 2 drops 6 p.m. tomorrow. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out.